I was just 3 steps from the gate when I heard the dry click of the lock being pulled. My eyes met his through the white-painted iron bars, and for an instant, just a painful, never-ending instant, I saw the boy I had cradled in my arms during sleepless nights, the same one who cried, clinging to my legs on his first day of school. But that 32-year-old man, staring back at me now, with his jaw tight and his eyes darting away from mine, was no longer that boy. My hands, still holding the bags with the gifts I bought for my grandchildren, trembled. The Sunday afternoon was sunny, absurdly beautiful for such an ugly moment. Birds sang in the trees on the street, while my heart shattered inside my chest, like glass being crushed slowly. "Mom, today is not a good day," he said, and his voice came out low, embarrassed, but firm enough to drive each word in like a nail into raw flesh. Behind him, through the living room window, I could see her shadow, Mariana, my daughter-in-law, watching the scene with her arms crossed, a statue of judgment and coldness. My grandchildren, Lucas and Sophia, ran to the window waving at me with those innocent smiles that tear the soul of any grandmother, but they were pulled inside before I could wave back. The gate remained locked. I remained outside, on the wrong side, like a stranger, like someone unwanted in the life I myself built with blood, sweat, and tears that no one ever counted. I stood there, unable to move, feeling the warm sun on my back and the glacial cold in my soul. The bags weighed in my hands, like anchors pulling me down into an abyss of rejection that I never imagined possible. A neighbor crossed the street, pretending not to see, but I knew she saw. Everyone always sees our humiliation, even when they pretend otherwise. I swallowed the lump in my throat, took a deep breath, trying to find some dignity in the pieces of what remained of me there on the sidewalk, and turned around. Each step back to my car was an eternity of pain. I placed the bags in the back seat, toys that my grandchildren would never receive, hugs that I would never give, and sat behind the wheel unable to drive. I just cried. I cried like I hadn't cried in years, with my forehead resting on the steering wheel, sobbing like a lost child, asking God and the entire universe how I got there, how the son I raised with so much love became the man capable of locking a gate in his own mother's face. None of that made sense, unless I went back in time, unless I revisited the years that brought me to that locked gate. I got married too young, at 19, to a man who promised the world and delivered only crumbs of affection and mountains of absence. Ricardo was never violent, never raised a hand to me, but his indifference was a silent violence that corroded everything inside. He worked, paid the bills, but he was always distant, always too tired for the family, always too busy to notice that I was drowning in loneliness inside our own home. When I found out I was pregnant with Gustavo, my son, my only son, I felt such pure joy that I thought everything would change, that we would finally have something real connecting us. But Ricardo just nodded when I told him, said that's good, like someone commenting on the weather, and went back to watching television. Gustavo was born in a March dawn, after 16 hours of labor that almost killed me. Ricardo was on a business trip, or at least that's what he said, and I held that tiny baby alone in the hospital, with only a kind nurse telling me that I would be a great mother. I looked at those closed little eyes, at that red and wrinkled little face, and swore right there that he would never feel the lack that I felt, that I would give him all the love that my husband didn't give me, that I would be a mother and father if necessary. And I was. Ricardo continued to be a shadow in our life, present only in photographs and in silent Sunday meals. He left when Gustavo was 7 years old, left a note on the kitchen table saying that he had found someone else, that he needed to start over, that he would send me money for the boy. The money appeared irregularly. The father never appeared again. I raised my son with my bare hands, with my pride swallowed, with 3 simultaneous jobs that made me sleep 4 hours a night. I cleaned houses in the morning, worked as a supermarket cashier in the afternoon, and made snacks to sell in the early hours of the morning. My hands, which today are full of spots and bulging veins, were raw from scrubbing floors, from cutting onions, from packing groceries. But Gustavo never lacked anything. He had a clean and ironed uniform, new notebooks every start of the year, lunch in his backpack every day. I went to school meetings. Okay, Here is the culturally adapted version for an English-speaking audience. Even after working 12 hours, I'd sit on those uncomfortable chairs with my back aching and my heart full of pride when the teachers said my boy was bright, polite, and dedicated. He was my reward, my reason not to give up when I was so tired I could barely stand. I gave up everything for him. I gave up rebuilding my life, accepting invitations from that kind gentleman at the bakery who looked at me with interest, having my own time, my own dreams. David was my dream. Seeing him grow up healthy, raising him to be a good man, that was all I wanted. When he got accepted to college for engineering, I sold my old car to pay for tuition and the first materials. I took crowded buses for 4 years, so he could study without having to work, so he could have the chance I never had. He graduated with honors. On graduation day, wearing that cap and gown, he hugged me in front of everyone and said, "Mom, all this is thanks to you, you're my hero." I cried so much, I soaked the borrowed suit he was wearing. That was the happiest day of my life. I thought we had won together. I thought nothing could separate us after everything we went through side by side. Then Ashley showed up. They met at his work, at a big company, where he got a job right after graduating. She was pretty, came from a wealthy family, spoke 3 languages, and had a master's degree from overseas. The first time David brought her to dinner at home, I felt something strange in my chest, a pang of intuition that I tried to ignore. She looked at my simple house, with that polite but assessing smile, like someone visiting a curiosity museum from the past. She complimented my cooking with genuine surprise, as if she didn't expect someone like me could cook well. "Your mom is amazing, David," she said, but her tone had something condescending, something that made me feel small in my own kitchen. In the beginning, I tried to build a bridge. I invited the couple for lunches, offered to help with anything, bought little gifts thinking of her. But Ashley had an uncanny ability to make me feel inadequate without saying anything directly offensive. When I told her I worked cleaning houses, she said, "How admirable, that kind of manual labor must be so difficult." When I offered to make their wedding cake, she thanked me but hired an expensive pastry shop, explaining that she wanted something more sophisticated for the event. David always laughed nervously in these situations, changed the subject, never defended me. That hurt more than her jabs. The boy I raised to be strong was becoming weak in front of a woman who manipulated him with smiles and silent expectations. They got married in an elegant ceremony that cost more than everything I earned in 3 years of work. I paid for my own dress and gift. I didn't want Ashley to have ammunition to say I depended on them. During the party, I was introduced to her parents, business people full of pretense, who greeted me with polite coldness before turning their backs on me. I overheard Ashley's mother comment to a friend, not knowing I was nearby, "Poor David, coming from such a humble background." But Ashley always had a heart of gold, accepting someone in those conditions. I swallowed that like I swallowed so many humiliations in life, with my head held high and the venom spreading inside. The following years were a slow and painful process of becoming invisible in my own son's life. Ashley got pregnant quickly, 2 kids in 3 years, and suddenly there were rules about when I could visit, how long I could stay, what I could or couldn't do with my grandchildren. "It's just that the kids have a routine, Mrs. Miller," she explained with that condescending smile. "We don't want to mess up the parenting method we're implementing." Parenting method, as if loving and hugging grandchildren was something that needed a manual and prior approval. I bit my tongue, because I didn't want to lose the little access I had to the little ones. They were my light, my continuation, my purest loves, but even that was being cut off little by little. My visits were reduced to once a month, always with a scheduled time, always with Ashley supervising every interaction. When Lucas, my oldest grandson, hurt himself playing and came running to my arms, Ashley practically snatched him from me, saying he needed to learn not to be so emotionally dependent. When I brought toys as a gift, she examined each one as if I was bringing drugs, explaining that they had specific educational standards for the children's stimuli. My gifts usually disappeared the following week, donated or stored where the children couldn't reach them. If you're following this story, and it has touched your heart in some way, and subscribe to the channel to keep receiving real stories like this one, because they all need to be told, they all need to be heard. Gustavo watched everything in guilty silence. I saw the internal struggle in his eyes whenever Mariana treated me with disdain disguised as politeness, but he never said anything, never took my side. Once, just once, I tried to talk to him about it. "Son, I feel like I'm becoming a stranger in your life," I said, holding his hands in mine. He looked away, mumbled something about Mariana being stressed with the kids, that I needed to understand, that he was trying to keep the peace at home. "But I'm your mother," I replied, and my voice came out more broken than I wanted. "I know, Mom," he said, and hugged me quickly before leaving those empty words echoing in the silence of my house. The situation reached a breaking point on Sophia's last birthday, my youngest granddaughter. It was a big party, with clowns, expensive decorations, dozens of children and well-dressed adults. I arrived with a gift that I chose with all my love, a beautiful doll that I knew Sophia would adore, and was greeted at the door by Mariana with a frozen smile. "Helena, what a surprise," she said, even though I had confirmed my presence a week ago. "I didn't know you were coming." I walked in feeling all eyes on me, my simple outfit contrasting with the designer dresses of the other women. I tried to find Gustavo, but he was busy being the perfect host, laughing with his wife's wealthy friends. I sat in a corner with Sophia on my lap, the little girl happily eating brigadeiro, Brazilian chocolate fudge balls, and telling me about school with that childish excitement that warms any heart. Then I heard it. Mariana's voice wasn't as low as she thought, or maybe she wanted me to hear. "I don't know why she insists on coming," she was saying to a group of friends near the dessert table. "Gustavo has already explained that we're trying to establish boundaries, that her presence is sometimes complicated. The children get confused with such different parenting styles, and frankly, I think it's embarrassing for them to have to explain to their school friends about the grandmother who used to be a cleaning lady." The world stopped. My heart stopped. Sophia kept talking on my lap, but I couldn't hear anything but those words ricocheting in my skull. Embarrassing, cleaning lady, boundaries. Mariana's friends made sounds of supportive agreement, and one of them even laughed, a low and cruel laugh that pierced me like a knife. I looked at Gustavo, and for a second our eyes met across the room. He had heard. I knew he had heard by the way he looked away immediately, by the way his face turned red, but he said nothing. He didn't cross the room to defend me, he didn't scold his wife, he just turned his back, and continued talking to the guests, as if nothing had happened. I left that party before the happy birthday song, making up some excuse that no one believed or bothered to question. I cried all the way home, driving on autopilot while 25 years of absolute dedication paraded in my mind like a cruel movie. Every diaper I changed, every fever I stayed up all night measuring, every meal I skipped so he could eat better, every dream I buried so he could dream. All this to be called embarrassing by the woman my son chose, and worse, to be abandoned by him in that moment, when I most needed him to be the man I taught him to be. I spent weeks without hearing from him. I didn't call because my pride was too hurt, and he didn't call because, well, I don't know why. Maybe he was too busy with his new and shiny life. Maybe Mariana had convinced him that I was really a problem that needed to be managed, until Mother's Day arrived. No call, no message, no visit. I spent the whole day looking at the silent phone, at the door that no one knocked on, feeling a void so big that I thought it was going to swallow me whole. At night, I finally received a message: "Sorry Mom, busy day, see you soon." 5 words. 25 years of love were worth 5 words typed without thinking. That's when what changed everything happened. A week after that phantom Mother's Day, I received a call from Gustavo's former boss, the owner of the first company where he worked before he met Mariana. Dona Celia. Miss Celia was an elegant and insightful lady who had always been kind to me. "Helena, I need to talk to you personally," she said, and there was urgency in her voice. We met at a cafe in the city center, and what she told me turned my world upside down once again. "I'm telling you this because you deserve to know the truth," Miss Celia began, stirring her coffee nervously. Gustavo was in the process of being promoted at He had been with the company for 3 years. He was going to be promoted to regional manager, an important position, good salary, but he refused. He said he was going to work at his father-in-law's company, that he would have more opportunities there. She paused, looking deep into my eyes. Helena, Gustavo wasn't hired by his father-in-law's company because of competence. It was a marriage agreement. Mariana made it clear to him from the start. Either he agreed to work under her family's command, following all their rules, including about how to manage his personal life, or there was no wedding. She literally bought your son Helena. And part of the agreement was to distance him from the humble origins that she considers shameful. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Dona Celia continued. I found out about this because Mariana's father approached me at the time, wanting to know if Gustavo had potential. I confirmed that he did, and he was frank with me. He said his daughter was interested in a young man of simple origin but with a future, and that they needed to civilize him and clean up the problematic connections of the past. I'm telling you this now, because I recently found Gustavo at a business event. He looked broken, Helena, unhappy. He asked me about you, if I knew how you were, but said he couldn't look you up, because Mariana wouldn't allow it. Wouldn't allow it. A man in his early 30s saying his wife doesn't allow him to see his own mother. I left that cafe with the truth weighing on my shoulders like cement. My son hadn't changed on his own. He hadn't become insensitive by his own choice. He was trapped in a golden cage, bought and controlled by a family that saw people like me as obstacles to be removed. But that didn't take away his responsibility for the choices he made, for the times he stayed silent when he should have shouted, for the times he locked gates, literally and metaphorically, in the face of the woman who sacrificed everything for him. He was a victim. Yes, but he was also a perpetrator. Both things could be true at the same time. It was with this newfound awareness that I made the decision to go to his house that Sunday, not to confront, not to argue, but to look into my son's eyes and ask if he was happy, if that life of empty appearances was worth the price of losing me. I took the presents for the grandchildren as always, but this time I also took my saved words, my swallowed truth, my mistreated but not destroyed dignity. I would speak. He would listen to me. And then we could at least be honest with each other about the abyss that Mariana dug between us with his silent permission. And then he locked the gate. In my face. With that expression of a son obedient to his wife's orders, of a man who chose false peace instead of uncomfortable truth. There, with that sound of the lock slamming, I finally understood that I had lost my son not just to another woman, but to his own cowardice, to the ambition that was worth more than integrity, to the material comfort that cost him his soul, and my presence. But I didn't collapse on the sidewalk. I didn't beg. I didn't scream. Something inside me, something that was built with 25 years of strength tested by fire, stood up straight and firm. I looked at Gustavo through those bars, and said with the clear and firm voice that I didn't know I still had. Okay son, you've made your choice. I hope it's worth it. I hope their money, the nice house and the status make up for what you lost today. Because you lost. You lost the woman who never gave up on you, who never abandoned you, who never made you choose between her and the world. I never asked you to lock doors on me. I always opened mine wide open for you. But I respect your decision. When you wake up from this prison you chose to call marriage, when you look in the mirror and don't recognize the man you've become, you know where to find me. If I'm still here. He opened his mouth to speak, but I was already turning my back. I heard my name being called, but I didn't look back. I placed the bags with the gifts in front of the gate. My grandchildren deserved to know that their grandmother thought of them, even though she was barred, and walked to my car with my head held high, with each step being a declaration that my dignity was never and would never be defined by who rejects me. That night, sitting alone in my silent house, I didn't cry. I was at peace for the first time in years. Painful peace. But peace. I had done my part. I had raised a man, educated a human being, dedicated my whole life to making sure he had every opportunity. He chose to use those opportunities to distance himself from the one who raised him. That was his choice. Not my failure. His professional and material success didn't change the fact that as a son, as a human being capable of gratitude and loyalty, he had failed. And I could finally free myself from the guilt of not being enough. Peace. Because I always have been. I've always been more than enough. A few weeks passed. My routine went back to normal. Work, home, small pleasures I had forgotten to cultivate when my whole life revolved around Gustavo. I started attending a craft group at church, made friends who treated me with genuine respect, accepted dinner at the home of that kind gentleman from the bakery who still looked at me with interest after all these years. I discovered that there was life after rejection, that I had value independent of being recognized as a dedicated mother or a present grandmother. Then, on a rainy Thursday, my phone rang late at night. It was Gustavo. His voice was broken, choked, unrecognizable. "Mom, I messed up. I messed up so badly. Mariana gave me an ultimatum today. She said that if I keep thinking about you, if I question her decisions about the family, she'll file for divorce and take the kids. She has expensive lawyers, Mom. She has power. And I'm afraid. But I'm also ashamed. So ashamed. Of the man I've become. Of the son I've failed to be." I listened in silence as he poured out years of accumulated guilt, of belated perceptions, of self-imposed prisons. When he finished, when a heavy silence took over the line, I said, "Gustavo, I love you. I always have loved you, and I always will love you. But love cannot be used as an excuse to allow disrespect. You are an adult. You have choices. If you choose to continue in a relationship that forces you to lock doors to your mother, that's your choice and your consequences. But if you choose to break free, if you choose to seek a life where you can be a son and a father and a man with integrity, I will be here. Not to save you, because you need to save yourself, but to support you. The difference is subtle, but essential." He cried on the other end of the line. I didn't promise that everything would be all right. I didn't make reconciliation plans. I didn't rush to hug him and say that everything was forgiven, because it wasn't. True forgiveness doesn't erase the pain, doesn't forget the wounds, doesn't pretend that nothing happened. True forgiveness is making peace with reality. It's understanding that people fail, but can still choose to transform themselves. Gustavo would have to make his own choices and live with them. I made mine, and for the first time in my life, I chose myself. Today, months after that locked gate, I live differently. I still think about my grandchildren every day. I still feel that pain of a grandmother prevented from loving completely. I still wonder what it would be like to see them grow up without Mariana's filters and prohibitions. But I've also learned that some battles cannot be won by fighting. Some victories come from knowing when to retreat and preserve yourself, when to let the natural consequences of other people's choices teach them the lessons that your words never managed to convey. Gustavo is in the process of separating now, not because of me directly, but because he realized that he had become a prisoner of a life that he didn't really choose, only accepted as inevitable. He's fighting for the children, facing the expensive lawyers, rediscovering who he is without Mariana's constant influence. We talk from time to time, cautious conversations where we both step carefully on still sensitive ground. We haven't gone back to being what we were, and maybe that's for the best. Relationships forged on dependence and unilateral sacrifice were not healthy for either of us. Maybe we can build something new, based on mutual respect and conscious choices. If this story touches you in some way, if you see pieces of your life reflected in these words, know that you are not alone. We are not alone. Many of us raise children with unconditional love, giving up everything, only to discover that unconditional love is sometimes misinterpreted as a guaranteed presence that can be treated without care. The greatest lesson I learned, and that I share with you now, is that we need to love ourselves unconditionally too. We need to respect ourselves, set boundaries, choose our own dignity, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. You who listen to me may be going through something similar. You may be on the outside of literal or metaphorical gates, locked out of lives you helped build. I want you to know that your value never was and never will be determined by who can see you. There are people blind to treasures right in front of their eyes, and that blindness is their problem, not your inadequacy. You are valuable because you are, because you survived, because you loved, because you gave your best, even when you didn't receive reciprocity. That's not weakness. It's a monumental strength that the world doesn't know how to honor properly. Save your strength for those who know how to value it. Hold your head up high even with a broken heart. Walk away from locked gates, knowing that you tried, that you loved, that you were everything you could be. And if one day those gates open, and some will open, you decide if you still want to cross them, or if you've learned to build a better home within yourself. A place where no one can lock you out, because you yourself hold the keys. My story doesn't have a fairy tale happy ending. It has a real ending of a woman who learned, painfully, that sometimes letting go is the only true form of love that remains. That sometimes we save ourselves not by fighting to keep people who don't want to stay, but by honoring ourselves enough to continue living, loving, existing fully even in the face of rejection. The locked gate did not define me. My reaction to it did, and I chose to get up, dust myself off, and walk with dignity even when my heart begged me to stay and fight. That was my silent revolution, my power, my victory. And it is this same revolution that I wish for you. Asterisk, 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 cultural adaptation for English-speaking audience. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. This segment is already quite universally understandable and emotionally resonant. There aren't any specific cultural references that would require adaptation. The message about self-love, resilience, and letting go transcends cultural boundaries. Therefore, no specific changes are necessary.